welcome to Broken Entertainment, and today I have just finished Demon in White by Christopher Ruocchio, book 3 of the Sun Eater science fantasy series, and I have a spoiler-free, or mostly spoiler-free review for you today. And I want to start off by saying that I was originally going to finish the original Mistborn series first, and then go to this, and then go to some indie books that I've highlighted previously on the channel. And I'm just not that interested in Mistborn. I, you know, I it was between this and Mistborn, and I'm like, Demon in White sounds way more interesting. And I really, really love the writing of Brandon Sanderson, and there's good quality stuff in Mistborn. But I think it's early Brandon Sanderson versus late Brandon Sanderson. I came into Brandon Sanderson through the Stormlight Archive, and to me, it's a world of difference. And that'll be a video coming up where I talk about late versus early, and I talk about the reasons I just don't care that much about finishing Mistborn after 2 books, and we'll get into that. But so we're gonna do Sun Eater here, and then, or sorry, Demon White, and then move on to the indie books, and we'll go from there. So, Demon in White is absolutely fantastic. It is, of the 3 books, it is far and above the best one. And that's not to take anything away from the first 2 books. It's just that good. The first book is a lot of political intrigue. It's a very slow build, and only at the very end do you kind of get introduced to the main plot of the series. The second book has some really awesome action, some fantastic characters in it, and gives you a lot more knowledge on the lore, the world building itself, and what's going on. This book takes those facets up to 11, and then it takes the political intrigue and it cranks that up too. So it's the best of both of the first 2 books by far, and combines their best elements into one fantastic story. And one of the things I really like about Christopher Ruocchio is that he does not have the exact same pacing per book. This book has kind of similar pacing to the second book, but it's different. And the way they play out is different, and I don't ever feel like I'm like, okay, I know where this is going, maybe not lore or plot-wise, but I know rhythmically where this is going, which is one weakness I have with Brandon Sanderson. You know, generally with his books, once you've read enough of them, where you're going. And you won't know the plot, you won't know the surprises, you won't know what the characters are going to do necessarily, but you know that things are going to get really, really bad, and then everything's going to turn around at the very end, and that you're going to spend most of the book kind of backsliding into that deep trench before you come back out the other side. Christopher Ruocchio doesn't really do that. He follows a different pacing per book and kind of a different setup per book, and it's very interesting, just the difference. Now, one thing about his books too, the names I think are fantastic. The book covers have been pretty fantastic as well. Wasn't a huge fan of the book cover for the first novel, but they're pretty good otherwise. And this book, I compared it on Instagram to getting on an airplane to go somewhere, and when you disembark, you're getting off of a train. Like, everything changes, and you're like, what? And there's some major reveals lore-wise in this book, and major kind of mind-bendy stuff where you're like, wow, okay. You knew it was science fantasy, and you saw some of that in the first book. You definitely saw more of that in the second book. And by the end of the third book, you're like, wow, okay. This is totally not what I thought was happening, and totally not what I thought I was getting into. In a very good way. It's totally mind-opening, totally like, wow, okay, this is not. And you get it because it's first person. The character goes through that too of like, oh, okay. And Christopher Rocchio at one point compared this book to being kind of like, all of a sudden the name is slipping my mind for no reason. The Empire Strikes Back, tonally speaking. I don't think that's 100% accurate, but I see where he's getting that from. And very just, I don't want to get into detail, but I do. But I don't want to give away the spoilers because they're huge and massive changes to what's going on and what you're, not to the changes to what's going on, changes to your understanding of what's going on. It goes to a whole different plane of just like, okay, there's a lot more going on here than you thought. And I love that about this book. I like the political intrigue. You meet the upper echelons of the empire. That's really cool. And he really follows this rule that I've heard with comics and that I fully agree with, that the main character doesn't have to be the only one who does something cool, and they don't have to do something cool all the time. It's okay for them to be rescued. It's okay for them to make mistakes, to screw up. But at some point in the narrative, they have to be the one to do something just awesome. And absolutely in this book, a couple of times. Fantastic. Especially the way these things play out. There's not a lot of fighting in the book except for towards the end. Very big fight scenes going on there. You really crank up the scale of the fighting as well. The scale of the conflict from the second book. The first book, conflict was pretty limited. It was very personal. The second book had conflict that was smaller scale in comparison to this book, but larger scale, closer to squad on squad, army type stuff. This is your full on raging battle. Awesome stuff. Love the way it's written, love the pacing. There's people who don't like his foreshadowing. I love his foreshadowing because he foreshadows something early on in this book and had foreshadowed it very slightly in the other books, and he brings it up repeatedly, and you're just like, okay, I know something really, really bad's gonna happen in relation to something specific, but you don't know what it's gonna be or how it's gonna play out, and it really had me just like waiting for that to happen. And there's some red herrings involved in that, and it's just really cool the way it's written. I love the way that's done. Love the world building in this series so far, and it really, really escalates in this book. Just the way everything's laid out, the way you begin to understand the universe, the way you see the Empire and how it functions. Truly, he kind of has done this thing where you start out very focused, right, in the first book, and then just slowly kind of the camera pans back, basically. And I love that style of world building reveal. Rather than just dumping information on you, it's like, I'm going to slowly pan back, and you're going to realize more and more as we go into the series. Now, looking forward a lot to book 4. It's done, but it's not out. So it'll be a while before I can get to that and review it. And then I believe there's only one book left after that. So then the series will be over. There's some short stories and stuff as well. I'll probably fill in some gaps in time with that eventually. But next up is some indie books that I think will be pretty interesting. And they're written by some subscribers to my channel. I'm excited to see what they've written, because it's time to take the reins. It's time for us to say, okay, you know what? I'm not getting what I want out of Hollywood. I'm not getting what I want out of mainstream publishing. I'm not getting what I want out of mainstream comics. So I'm either going to make it myself or I'm going to support the people that do. Now, Chris Ferracchio is not indie, but he is, on the scheme of things, he is more indie than a lot of people. And even when you're not indie, I'm not saying never support mainstream, right? Support what deserves supporting. Go out there, find indies, find awesome stuff. And when you see something done in the mainstream, done by traditional publishing, done by Hollywood, that is really well done, I think that's when we need to support that. Because it's you're taking from, you're saying, no, I'm not going to go see this, but I will go see this. And hopefully that idea eventually gets across to them, right? But love this book, love this series. I almost don't want it to end. And it brings up also, just as a writer, as someone who follows other writers and authors, please, please, please. I know a lot of readers out there go, well, I'm not going to buy the book if it's part of a series until the entire series is published. People who work with traditional publishing, especially, are reliant on book sales, because if the company publishing their book doesn't like their sales figures, they'll just stop. And you will never get the end of that series. And self-publishing works that way too. Some people will say, you know what? I'm not going to spend my time on this. It's not selling. I'm going to try a different idea, and they won't finish it. And it's tempting. I know. I see it all the time where people say, no, I'm going to wait until this series is finished, because they see Game of Thrones. They see, what's the other name of that fantasy series? I can't remember the name of it. But there's another famous fantasy series out there. If you know it, let me know in the comments below. That it hasn't been finished yet either. And so people are like, I don't want to get invested, and then it never happens. Well, this is going to happen. This guy writes pretty quickly, almost on par with Brandon Sanderson in terms of speed, I think, and very reliably. You got to support people that you like, because if you don't go out and buy those books, you may never get the end of the series. So if you're thinking that way, if you're thinking about that, please consider not doing it. Consider, if you're interested in Sun Eater, go out and buy the first book. Go out and buy the second book. Go out and buy the third book. It'll give it that support, that impetus for the company to say, okay, yeah, here's another one. Let's put this other book out. And, let's put limited editions out. Let's release leather-bound covers, that kind of stuff. All that stuff comes about from sales. It doesn't come about just because. And that's true in indie publishing as well. When I do indie publishing, when I start publishing my stuff, I'm not going to be tempted to spend the money and the time on, for example, a limited edition version of a book if the sales aren't there. It's a lot of money. So please think about that. And if you like science fantasy, if you like Star Wars, if you like Warhammer 40K, and I intentionally picked both of those for reasons. If you like those two, or even just the one, you'll like this book series. Just going to throw that out there. It is not your average science fiction whatsoever. You will absolutely, if you enjoy those two things, or one of those two things, please give this book a shot. That's my recommendation. This author, at this point, after finishing this book, they are one of the two authors that really inspire me to work on my own stuff and to get done and publish and all this stuff, because I spent years going to the bookstore and just getting depressed, because it's like, man, it's just the same dead people over and over again, or it's all franchises, and it was just like, it made me want to write, but it also kind of took away that desire, because it's like, well, how am I ever going to get on this bookshelf if all I see are people that have been writing for a zillion years, or people that have been dead for 20 years, or franchises? That's what you see most of the time in science fiction fantasy sections, unfortunately, in bookstores. But Brandon Sanderson, Christopher Rocchio, both of them, have really shown me there's still stuff out there. You know, I fell in love with reading because of BattleTech, because of Anne McCaffrey's Pern series, because of Raptor Red. And it's nice to fall in love with reading again, instead of doing it just to improve my own technical abilities. So that's where I stand on this book and where I stand on these two authors. If you like these things, you will enjoy this book series. If you like a combination of politics and intrigue and action and military, you will enjoy this book series. The first book doesn't start out grand and huge, but trust me, it's going to get there. And the first book's really a character focus. It's in first person, but it's very well done. I can't recommend this book enough. Or this series enough, really. I just can't. So let me know what you think in the comments down below. If you've read any of these books, let me know. If you haven't, let me know. If you're one of those people that's considering just buying when series are complete, let me know. We can talk about that in the comments as well. If you liked the video, please hit the like button. If you're not subscribed, please consider subscribing. Hit the bell for notifications, and I will see you next time.